The day I came home early. I never thought I'd be writing one of these posts, but here I am. They say life has a way of testing you when you least expect it. And for me, that test came on a random Tuesday in April when I decided to surprise my wife by coming home early from a business trip. The setup. For context, I'm Jake, 34, been married to Melissa for 8 years. We have a nice house in the suburbs of Chicago. No kids yet, but we've been talking about it. I work in tech consulting, which means I travel a lot, like 3 days a week minimum. Melissa works from home as a graphic designer. We had what I thought was a solid marriage. Communication, trust, the whole package. At least that's what I believed. My consulting firm had sent me to Boston for what was supposed to be a 5-day project. The client was difficult. The hours were brutal, but we managed to wrap things up 2 days early. Instead of hanging around or telling Melissa I was coming home, I decided to surprise her. She'd been complaining about how much I'd been traveling lately, so I thought this would be a nice gesture. Show her I was prioritizing our time together when I could. I took an early flight home and stopped to pick up flowers and her favorite takeout from that Thai place she loves. I even splurged on a nice bottle of wine. All the ingredients for a perfect surprise homecoming, right? Wrong. The discovery. I pulled into our driveway around 2 p.m. Melissa's car was there, which wasn't unusual since she worked from home. What was unusual was the black Audi parked on the street in front of our house. I recognized it immediately. It belonged to Dave, my friend from college who had moved to our city about a year ago. We'd reconnected, invited him over for dinner several times, helped him network when he was looking for a job. He and his wife had split up 6 months ago, and we'd been there for him through the divorce. I'd even let him crash on our couch for a week when things got really bad. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Dave and Melissa had become friends too, and they occasionally collaborated on projects. He worked in marketing and sometimes needed her design skills. So seeing his car there didn't immediately set off alarm bells. I quietly unlocked the front door, planning to sneak in and surprise Melissa. Our house has an open floor plan, so from the entryway, you can see straight through to the kitchen and living room. No one was there. I set down the food and flowers, thinking maybe they were in her home office. That's when I heard the laughter coming from upstairs. Something in my gut tightened. I've always trusted my instincts. They've saved me in business deals and warned me about sketchy situations. And right now, they were screaming that something was very wrong. I moved quietly up the stairs, not making a sound. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, and I could hear low voices, Melissa's and a man's. Dave's. I pushed the door open. There was Dave, lounging on our bed, wearing MY favorite terry cloth bathrobe, the one Melissa had given me for Christmas last year. He had a glass of whiskey in his hand. My whiskey, from the bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion. Melissa was sitting at her vanity, fully dressed thankfully, but her hair was wet like she'd just gotten out of the shower. They both looked up when the door opened, and the expression on their faces, shock, guilt, fear, told me everything I needed to know. Jake. Melissa jumped up. You're supposed to be in Boston. Dave nearly spilled the whiskey. Hey, man, this isn't what it looks like. The most infuriating cliche in the history of being caught. Of course it was exactly what it looked like. Really, I said, my voice surprisingly calm considering the hurricane raging inside me. Because it looks like you're wearing my bathrobe and drinking my whiskey in my bedroom with my wife. We were just... Melissa started. Save it. I cut her off. I need you both out of my house in the next 5 minutes. This is my house, too, Melissa protested. Fine. Then I'll leave. I turned to go, but not before adding. But Dave, the robe stays. It was a gift. I walked out, got in my car, and just drove. No destination in mind. Just putting distance between myself and the scene I had just witnessed. My phone was blowing up with texts and calls from Melissa, but I ignored them all. The aftermath. I ended up at a hotel downtown, paid for a week up front. I needed time to think, to process, to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. The next morning, I called my boss and explained I needed some personal time. He was understanding, told me to take as long as I needed. Then I called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but Sarah Hoffman, the best divorce attorney in Chicago. She had a reputation for being ruthless but fair. I scheduled a consultation for that afternoon. Sarah gave it to me straight. Illinois is a no-fault divorce state, so the infidelity wouldn't affect the division of assets much. But there were still steps I could take to protect myself. She advised me to gather financial records, document everything, and not move back into the house until we had a formal separation agreement in place. And Jake, she said as our meeting ended, no social media. Not a word about this to anyone who doesn't absolutely need to know. The quieter we keep this, the better position you'll be in. I took her advice to heart. While Melissa was blowing up my phone, I was methodically documenting our finances, taking inventory of our assets, and planning my next moves. I didn't respond to any of her messages for 3 days. When I finally did, it was short and to the point. I'll be by on Saturday at 10 a.m. to pick up some clothes and my work equipment. I expect you to be out of the house during that time. Her response came immediately. Jake, please, we need to talk about this. It's not what you think. Dave and I didn't read the rest. I didn't care what excuse they concocted. The image of Dave in my robe in my house when my wife was burned into my brain. Saturday came, and true to my word, I showed up at 10 a.m. sharp. Melissa's car was gone, but Dave's Audi was parked in the driveway. So much for my request. Dave opened the door before I could even use my key. He looked terrible, unshaven, bags under his eyes, still wearing yesterday's clothes. Jake, man, you gotta let me explain, he started. I brushed past him. I'm here for my things, not a conversation. It's not what you think. Seriously. Melissa and I... Save it for someone who cares. I cut him off, heading upstairs to pack. He followed me up, still talking. Look, I know how it looked, but nothing happened. She was just helping me through some stuff with my ex. I spilled coffee on my clothes, so she threw them in the wash and gave me a robe to wear. That's it. I stopped and turned to face him. Why was her hair wet? He blinked. What? Her hair was wet, like she'd just showered. Why? I don't know, he stammered. Maybe she had just showered? And you just happened to be there, in my robe, drinking my whiskey while my wife had just showered. That's your story. He had no answer for that. I finished packing my things in silence while Dave hovered anxiously. As I was about to leave, he made one last attempt. Jake, we've been friends for 15 years. Don't throw that away over a misunderstanding. I looked him dead in the eyes. We're not friends. We never were. A friend wouldn't do what you did. Now get out of my way. As I drove away, I blocked both their numbers. I wasn't interested in their excuses or explanations. I was focused on what came next. The strategy. Over the next few weeks, I poured myself into work while my personal life imploded. Sarah, my lawyer, was handling the divorce proceedings, and I was staying in a furnished apartment downtown that I'd leased for 6 months. Melissa had moved from texting and calling to emailing, sending long explanations and apologies. I forwarded them all to Sarah, without reading them. Dave had apparently gotten the message and stopped trying to contact me, though mutual friends told me he was telling everyone who would listen that it was all a big misunderstanding. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding. My job had always been my safety net. I was good at what I did, respected in my field, but now I was pouring even more energy into it. I took on additional projects, volunteered for the tough clients no one else wanted to handle, stayed late running numbers and perfecting presentations. My boss noticed. Jake, whatever's lit a fire under you, I'm not complaining, but make sure you don't burn out. I assure him I was fine, just focused. And I was. Work was the one area of my life where I felt in control, where merit mattered, where I could see direct results from my efforts. About a month after the incident, that's how I'd come to think of it, my boss called me into his office. "How would you feel about heading up the new San Francisco office?" he asked. Our firm was expanding to the West Coast, and they needed someone experienced to establish the new location. It would mean a significant promotion, a substantial raise, and equity in the company. "I'm interested," I said, trying to contain my excitement. "Good," he nodded, "because the partners already approved it. The job is yours if you want it." I accepted on the spot. A fresh start in a new city, doing work I loved, with a financial package that would set me up nicely. It was exactly what I needed. When I told Sarah about the move, she smiled for the first time since I'd hired her. "This works in our favor," she said. "It shows the court you're moving on with your life in a positive way. Plus, the increase in income will help offset any financial impact from the divorce." The timing couldn't have been better. We were approaching mediation, where Melissa and I, through our lawyers, would try to reach a settlement agreement without going to court. Sarah had advised me that the house would likely need to be sold and the proceeds split. But with my new position, I could afford to buy Melissa out if I wanted to. I didn't want to. The house held no appeal for me anymore. Let her have it if she wanted. I was moving on to bigger and better things. The day of mediation arrived. It would be the first time I'd seen Melissa face to face since the incident. I prepared myself mentally, running through scenarios with Sarah, practicing keeping my emotions in check. What I wasn't prepared for was Dave being there. He was sitting in the waiting area outside the mediation room when I arrived with Sarah. Melissa was nowhere to be seen. "What is he doing here?" I asked Sarah under my breath. "He has no legal standing in these proceedings," she assured me. "He can't participate in the mediation." Dave stood as we approached. "Jake, can we talk? Just for a minute?" Sarah stepped between us. "Mr. Harrison is here for a private legal proceeding. Any communication should go through counsel." "I don't have a lawyer," Dave said. "I just need 5 minutes." "Then I suggest you get one," Sarah replied coolly. "Now, please excuse us." We walked past him into the mediation room, where Melissa and her attorney were already seated. Melissa looked up when I entered, her eyes red-rimmed. I gave her a brief nod, professional, detached, and took my seat. The mediator, a former judge with decades of family law experience, explained the process and then invited each side to present their proposed settlement. Melissa's lawyer went first. Their proposal was reasonable. Split everything 50-50, sell the house and divide the proceeds. No alimony since we both had good incomes. But there was one sticking point. Melissa wanted to keep her share of our joint investment account intact rather than liquidating it. This account had been my pet project over the years. I'd researched investments, tracked performance, made strategic moves that had grown our initial $50,000 to nearly $300,000. Melissa had contributed to the initial funding, but had shown zero interest in managing it. Now she wanted half without doing any of the work. Sarah presented our counteroffer. I would keep 70% of the investment account in recognition of my work managing it, and Melissa would get the house outright with no need to buy me out. The mediator asked us to consider both proposals while she stepped out for a few minutes. As soon as the door closed, Melissa spoke directly to me for the first time. "I'm sorry, Jake. I've been trying to tell you that for months." I looked at her impassively. "Is that why Dave is here? Part of the apology tour?" She flinched. "I didn't know he was coming. I haven't even spoken to him since you found us." "So it was a one-time thing? That's supposed to make me feel better?" "Nothing happened," she insisted. "I know how it looked, but—" "Ms. Harrison," Sarah interrupted, "I advise you not to discuss the personal aspects of your separation without your counsel present." Melissa's lawyer, who had been reviewing papers, looked up and nodded in agreement. We lapsed into uncomfortable silence until the mediator returned. The rest of the session was strictly business. Proposals, counterproposals, numbers, assets. By the end of the day, we had a tentative agreement. Melissa would keep the house and 40% of the investment account. I would keep the remaining 60% plus my 401k and the new compensation package from my promotion. As we were leaving, Dave was still waiting outside. This time, he approached Melissa, who looked genuinely shocked to see him. "What are you doing here?" I heard her ask as Sarah and I walked past. "I came to fix this," he replied, "to tell Jake the truth." I kept walking. Whatever truth they had concocted didn't interest me. I had a new life to build. The truth, whether I wanted it or not. A week after mediation, as I was preparing for my move to San Francisco, I received an email from Dave with the subject line, "The actual truth. Please read." My first instinct was to delete it unread, but something made me hesitate. Maybe it was time to hear what they had to say, if only to finally put this chapter behind me. The email contained a link to a video file and a short message. I recorded this without Melissa knowing because I figured you'd never believe either of us otherwise. Watch it, then decide. Against my better judgment, I clicked the link. The video showed Dave's living room. The timestamp indicated it was from the day before the incident. Dave was sitting on his couch, and across from him was Melissa. They were clearly in the middle of a conversation. "I don't know what to do," Dave was saying. "The divorce is final. Lisa's already dating someone new, and I'm still a mess." "It takes time," Melissa replied. "You can't rush healing." "But that's just it. I don't think I'm healing. I think I'm getting worse. Last night, I actually thought about—" He trailed off. "Thought about what, Dave?" Melissa's voice was concerned. "Ending it," he said quietly. I had the pills right there. I was ready. Melissa moved to sit beside him on the couch. "Dave, that's serious. You need to talk to someone professional." "I can't. If it gets out at work that I'm unstable, that's it for my career. You know how it is. Then talk to Jake. He's your friend. He'd want to help." Dave shook his head. "Jake's got his own stuff going on. He's always traveling, always working. Besides, he's got all together, you know? Perfect job, perfect marriage. He wouldn't understand feeling like a complete failure." "Our marriage isn't perfect," Melissa said, sighing. "We have our issues like everyone else. But you guys are solid. That's what I always admired about you, too." The conversation continued, with Melissa convincing Dave to at least consider therapy, suggesting some names, offering to help him find someone discreet who wouldn't impact his professional reputation. The video cut and a new clip began. Same location, but the timestamp showed the next day, the day of the incident. Dave looked terrible, unshaven, eyes bloodshot, clothes rumpled like he'd slept in them. "Dave? What happened?" Melissa's voice came from behind the camera. "I had another bad night," he mumbled. "Couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about Lisa, about how much I've screwed everything up." "Have you eaten anything today?" He shook his head. "I'm coming over," Melissa said. "I'll bring lunch. We'll talk." The video cut again. The next clip showed Melissa's car pulling into Dave's driveway. She got out carrying takeout bags. The timestamp matched the day of the incident, about 2 hours before I arrived home. Another cut, and now they were in Dave's kitchen. Melissa was unpacking the food, while Dave sat at the counter, barely engaging. "You need to eat something," she insisted, pushing a container toward him. He picked at it half-heartedly. "Thanks for coming. I know you're busy." "Friends make time," she said simply. As they ate, Melissa kept the conversation going, telling funny stories about clients, asking Dave about work projects, clearly trying to keep his mind occupied with normal, everyday topics. Then Dave knocked over his water glass, soaking himself in the food. "Damn it," he exclaimed, jumping up as water dripped down his shirt and pants. "It's just water," Melissa said calmly. "Give me your clothes. I'll throw them in the dryer while we finish lunch." Dave hesitated. "Oh, please." Melissa rolled her eyes. "Nothing I haven't seen before." Go change into something dry and give me the wet clothes. The video cut again. The next clip showed Dave coming back into the kitchen wearing different clothes, handing Melissa a bundle of wet garments. "I'll be right back," she said, taking them. While she was gone, Dave's phone rang. He answered, had a brief conversation that sounded work-related, then hung up looking panicked. "Everything okay?" Melissa asked, returning. "That was my boss. There's an emergency client situation, and he needed to come in and handle it right now. On a Tuesday afternoon? That's rough. Tell me about it." Dave was already grabbing his keys and wallet. "Thanks for lunch and everything. I've got to run. What about your clothes? They're still in the dryer. I'll get them later. Can you just lock up when they're done? You know where the spare key is." "Sure, no problem." The video showed Dave leaving, then Melissa cleaning up the lunch mess. She checked the dryer, folded Dave's clothes, and placed them on his counter with a note. Then she left. The next clip showed Dave's car pulling into his driveway again. The timestamp was about 30 minutes before I arrived home. Dave went inside, then came back out carrying the folded clothes and drove away. The final clip was timestamped just minutes before I walked in on them. It showed Dave pulling up to our house, go to the door with his bundle of clothes, and Melissa letting him in. The video ended there. I sat staring at my screen for a long time. Then I watched it again. And again. There was no audio for the final clips, so I couldn't hear what they were saying when Dave arrived at our house or what happened inside before I got there. But the timeline was clear. Dave had gone to his house, found his clothes, and brought them to thank Melissa. Why he ended up in my robe remained a mystery, but the narrative of a secret affair was falling apart. I composed a reply to Dave's email. "Why were you in my robe drinking my whiskey when I walked in? And why was Melissa's hair wet?" His response came within minutes. "I spilled coffee on myself when I was thanking Melissa for helping me. She offered to wash my clothes again and gave me a robe to wear while I waited. She had just showered because she'd been for a run before I showed up. The whiskey, I helped myself when she wouldn't put my clothes in the wash. I was still in a bad place. I'm sorry, man. We both are." It sounded plausible. More plausible than an affair, honestly, given how long I'd known both of them. But the damage was done. Even if nothing physical had happened, they both lied by omission about Dave's mental state. Melissa had been counseling a suicidal friend without ever mentioning it to me. That level of secrecy in a marriage wasn't something I could easily forgive. I didn't respond to Dave's email. Instead, I forwarded the whole exchange, including the video, to Sarah, asking if it changed anything legally. Her response was pragmatic. "Legally, no. The settlement agreement is fair regardless. Personally, that's up to you." The decision. The day before I was set to leave for San Francisco, I asked Melissa to meet me at a coffee shop downtown. It was neutral territory, public enough to keep emotions in check, but private enough for a real conversation. She was already there when I arrived, nervously shredding a napkin. She looked up, hope flickering across her face when she saw me. I sat down across from her. I got Dave's email. I watched the video. Relief washed over her features. "So you know nothing happened?" "I know you weren't having an affair," I conceded. "But something did happen, Melissa. You kept secrets. Big ones." "I was trying to help a friend who was suicidal," she said defensively. "And you didn't think that was something you should mention to your husband." "Hey, Jake, Dave's in a really dark place. I'm trying to help him." That would have been too difficult. She looked down. "I knew how busy you were with work. And Dave specifically said he didn't want you to know. So his wishes came before our marriage. That's not fair." "None of this is fair," I replied. "Look, I didn't come here to rehash everything. I came to tell you that I'm still moving to San Francisco tomorrow, and I'm still going through with the divorce." Her face fell. "Even knowing the truth?" "The truth is that our marriage wasn't as solid as I thought it was. The truth is that we both kept things from each other. You with Dave's situation, me with how unhappy I've been with always being the one to travel, to sacrifice from my career. You never said you were unhappy, she protested. Exactly my point. We stopped communicating somewhere along the way. The incident just brought it all to the surface. She was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. So that's it? 8 years of marriage over because of a misunderstanding. Not because of a misunderstanding. Because we've grown apart. And neither of us noticed until something forced us to see it. I took a sip of my coffee. The settlement is fair. You get to keep the house. A good portion of our investments. We both get a fresh start. I don't want a fresh start, she said quietly. I want my husband back. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of doubt. Maybe we could work through this. Maybe couples therapy, a renewed commitment to communication. But then I thought about the excitement I felt about San Francisco, about the new challenge waiting for me there. I thought about how, even before the incident, Melissa and I had been living parallel lives rather than a shared one. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. I think this is for the best. I stood to leave, but she caught my hand. Jake, I really am sorry. For all of it. I nodded. I know. So am I. The new beginning. San Francisco welcomed me with fog-shrouded mornings and breathtaking views. The new office was a blank canvas, and I threw myself into shaping it with all the energy and focus I could muster. The divorce was finalized 3 months after I moved. Melissa kept the house, but ended up selling it 6 months later. She took a job in Seattle, her own fresh start. We exchanged brief, civil emails about final paperwork and asset transfers, and then that was it. 8 years of marriage reduced to logistical loose ends. Dave and I never spoke again. Mutual friends told me he'd gotten help, was doing better, had even started dating someone new. Good for him. I wished him well, but that friendship was a casualty I couldn't revive. As for me, the San Francisco office thrived under my leadership. Within a year, we doubled our client base and increased revenue by 70%. I bought a condo with a view of the bay, took up hiking on weekends, made new friends who knew nothing about my past. And then, at a client dinner 18 months after moving to San Francisco, I met Claire. She was smart, independent, ambitious. The CFO of a tech startup with a wicked sense of humor and a refreshing directness. We connected instantly, talked until the restaurant closed, continued our conversation over coffee the next morning. Unlike with Melissa, where we'd young and had grown together and then apart, Claire and I came into each other's lives already formed, already knowing who we were and what we wanted. We were partners, equals, each with our own careers and passions that we supported in the other. When I told her about my divorce, about the incident, about the lessons I'd learned the hard way about communication and trust, she listened without judgment. We all have history, she said simply. It's what we do with those lessons that matters. 2 years to the day after I moved to San Francisco, I asked Claire to marry me. She said yes. The morning of our engagement, I received an email from Melissa. Somehow, through the grapevine of mutual friends, she'd heard my news. Congratulations, Jake. I'm truly happy for you. I've met someone, too, a doctor at the hospital where I've been doing volunteer graphic design work. Life has a funny way of working out how it's supposed to, doesn't it? Be happy. You deserve it. I smiled as I read it. There was no bitterness, no regret. Just genuine well wishes from someone who had once been the most important person in my world. I replied with similar sentiments, and that was that. A chapter truly closed. Sometimes I think about the Jake who walked in on his wife and his friend that Tuesday in April. How devastated he was, how betrayed he felt, how his world seemed to be crumbling around him. If I could go back and tell him anything, it would be this. It gets better. Not just better. It gets exactly as it should be. What seemed like the worst day of my life became the first day of the path that led me here. To a fulfilling career, to a relationship built on true partnership, to a life that feels authentic and earned. I didn't just survive betrayal. I use it as a catalyst to create something better than I had before, not out of spite or revenge, but out of a genuine desire to live fully and honestly. And that, I think, is the greatest victory of all. The end.